In today's episode, I talked to Aaron, founder of the Plunjr app. We'll discuss ways to avoid plumbing disasters, especially during the holidays. And later, you'll meet Joe Peterson, longtime listener, first-time guest. Joe is at the tail end of a true labor of love in New Brunswick. But first, I am Stacy Grinsfelder from Blake Hill House, and I am the host of True Tales from Old Houses. Hello, everyone, and happy holidays. Our family celebrates a low-key version of Christmas, and as usual, it is shocking to me that it is here again already. I barely remember 2021. For those of you working right through the holiday season, thank you for what you do. I worked in the tourist industry for a long time, and I very clearly remember what it was like to work weekends and holidays. Sometimes you don't hear thank you nearly enough, so thank you, thank you, thank you. I do have some announcements today, and the first one is kind of big. Some of you may already know what I'm going to say because I did write about it on the blog and I talked about it on social media. Our big news is that in the nearish future, notice I didn't say exactly when, note the lack of a clear date, we will be moving to Salt Lake City. I'm just going to let that sit there for a second. All right, are you still with me? No one is more shocked about this than we are. Seriously, with no plans to move whatsoever, we actually refinanced our home loan and we closed on that at the end of September. Now, 3 months later, here we are. Andy starts his new job early next year. We decided that for now we're going to live in 2 states, and I am actually talking about 2 states in the U.S., Utah and New York, although I imagine we will also be living in the states of chaos and calm. I have so much to finish before we can even consider listing our house, and as always, I'm committed to doing the work correctly versus quickly. We are not flipping this house, and good work takes time. And honestly, I also need some time to get used to the idea that most of my dreams and plans for Blake Hill House need to shift. There's a lot to consider, and I will keep writing about all of it on my blog. So yes, the Blake Hill House blog will continue. And of course, this show, True Tales from Old Houses, will also continue without interruption. Podcasting is fully portable, and that is one of the reasons why I love it. So I guess not much is really going to change for quite some time, but I wanted to tell you all about it. So when I mention Salt Lake City or discuss moving, you'll know what the heck I'm talking about. No more surprises. Now, the next announcement is about season 7, which starts at the end of February. We had so much fun in the Hudson Valley that I'm actually planning another live audience show. And nothing is set in stone right now, but I am pretty sure that it will be happening in the Midwest. Probably at the end of May or early June. That's not a whole lot of information. I realize that the Midwest is gigantic, but as plans firm up, I'll let you know more. And finally, I have a little story to tell you that will help clarify something that Joe Peterson and I mentioned during his interview. Now, as I said, the intro, Joe is from Canada. And as we were talking, he mentioned Halifax, which I visited with my daughter, my mother, and my sister in 2018. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. It's a really old city with plenty of historic buildings. So a little tiny baby piece of history. Halifax originally belonged to the Mi'kmaq, who were indigenous to the Atlantic provinces of Canada. Then, of course, you know history, another group of people came along and had a different plan for the area. In the 1600s, the French established the colony of Acadia, and then the British settled Halifax in 1749. This is a seriously abridged version of events. It's really only meant to establish a timeline and give you some idea of how old the oldest buildings in Halifax truly are. So in my conversation with Joe, he mentions that Halifax is a really old city, and offhandedly I say, well, half of it is old. And then we kind of move on from there without really an explanation. And so here is the explanation. Modern Halifax is a city of about 430,000 people. It was born from the military because of its proximity to a very large ice-free harbor, Halifax Harbor. One of the most noticeable landmarks is the Citadel, the military fort, finished in 1856, and it's located on Citadel Hill. We stayed in that area, and that hill is no joke. My sister and I went running there, and we probably could have walked faster up the hill. At the top of the hill is the Citadel, but that portion of the city of Halifax is also positioned on the hill below with a clear view of Halifax Harbor. It's a really striking vista. As the hill flattens out above, there's plenty of city behind the Citadel as well. And the old buildings there remind me a lot of what you'd see in Buffalo, New York, my current home city, or maybe even parts of Philadelphia. Many of the buildings built in 1700s to mid 1800s just to help you get your bearings. And they're also very tightly packed together. I mean, you could almost feel like you could reach out the window and high five your neighbor. Then, as you leave that section of the city and travel north, suddenly everything starts to look different. The buildings are smaller and farther apart, and the architecture of the freestanding homes, I mean, it's old, but it's not the same. You feel like you're in another town altogether. And that's the half I was talking about with Joe. I mean, my fraction was a little generous there. It's not really half. And here's why it's so different. In 1917, there was a huge explosion in the Halifax harbor. The IMO, a Norwegian supply ship leaving the harbor, collided with the Mont Blanc, a French ship filled with explosives and ammunition heading into the harbor. Now, apparently, there was a rule against ships with explosives entering the harbor, but there was also, at that time, it was wartime, fear of a submarine attack. So, because of that concern, the rules were relaxed, and the Mont Blanc was allowed to enter the harbor. Not a good decision. When the two ships collided, the Mont Blanc caught fire. That fire caused an explosion, and the explosion caused a tsunami. The tsunami and the explosion together flattened over 1 square mile of the city. That's 2.5 kilometers for you smart metric people. Since the buildings were so tightly packed together, 2,000 people died and about 9,000 others were injured. Around 1,600 buildings were destroyed and the debris was scattered for miles. It was a disaster of epic proportions. In 1918, plans were put in place to rebuild, and most of the actual work took place in the 1920s. There's a lot of interesting rebuilding history that I'm not going to get into today, but I invite you to take a look. You could imagine how much planning it took to rebuild a huge swath of a city whose infrastructure was initially put in place in the early 1800s. The city government seized the opportunity to revitalize Halifax and thus the completely different look and feel of that portion of the city post-explosion. So there you have it, a little Canadian history from an American who probably doesn't even know half of it. So if any of my Canadian friends feel like I've missed some key points here, you are welcome to let me know. But at least now you'll have some context for my offhand comment to Joe. Today's Q&A guest is Aaron from the Plunjr app. Welcome to the show, Aaron.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm glad to chat with you. Usually when I chat with you, I have a handful of parts and I'm covered in potential plumbing disasters. So this is really nice. I'm like wearing a real sweater. I'm all fancied up today.
Nice. You look great.
Thank you. All right. So for today's Q&A, I've got to be honest that no one actually asked this exact question about what we're going to talk about. However, I think it's a really important topic for anyone who has indoor plumbing. And I imagine that's about 100% of my listeners. So if you're out there listening and you're currently using an outhouse or a basin of water for washing up, let me know. I will revise that percentage to 99.999%. Anyway, Aaron, I thought we could talk about how to avoid plumbing emergencies, especially around the holidays, and maybe some best practices to keep our plumbing in good working order. I can think of no one better qualified to ask than you.
Sounds good. Absolutely. Well, we just got past Brown Friday. If you don't know what that is, that's the plumber's busiest day of the year is the day after Thanksgiving, and that's typically because people are abusing their plumbing on those days, packed houses and all that good stuff. So
Can I just interrupt and tell you that
sure.
I was just at my in-laws and we had our own Brown Friday. I was, I could not stop laughing at all of the things on your social media account because I was like, yep, that's happening here. Yep, that's happening here. It turns out that unfortunately they have some collapses in their sewer line, which is of
Mhm.
course beyond the scope of my DIY plumbing experience. But we did have a plumber out. And I thought we could talk about some of those things. Like what if you have an emergency? What the heck do you do? But anyway, let's start with you.
And those are the things that show up. Plumbing systems that seemed like they were okay and under normal use of a 3 or 4 person household may not see effects of a collapsed line until they're stressed. And Thanksgiving Day, as we know, especially this last year, I think people got together a little more than they had in the year prior. We find that you got 20 people in the house flushing the toilet. That's 5 days worth of use in a couple hours. So yeah, especially older systems, houses with big trees out front. The roots, the reason your fruit trees are doing so well is probably because they found the sewer line, um,
Right.
and they're sucking up those nutrients. Some routine maintenance. If you have an older house, particularly if you have cast iron or clay pipes down there, it's good once a year just to have your local plumber snake them out. It seems like it's fruitless because they're in and out real quick. They throw the snake down. We know from the feel without a camera, we can tell, like, did we see roots? Did we feel anything funny going on there? Did the snake catch? And if you have a regular plumber that you like and you use every year, they'll be familiar with your property and they'll know the difference from the year prior.
I have a clay pipe here from my house to the street, and we have it snaked every single year. And the
Yeah.
reason we do is you said it. I'm relieved to know that was the best course of action because we found out the hard way twice that if we don't do it every
Yeah.
single year, then I'm going to have to put on those rubber boots and squeegee out the basement. And I am not a
It's not
fan.
fun. No.
No.
And there's for a slightly upcharge, your plumber will probably do a video for you. If you know you have a problem sewer, if you want to know a little bit more about it, they can see where those bellies or those collapsed lines are. We have cool tools now that are locators. We can find out exactly where it is, what the depth is. They can make spot repairs. There's trenchless options. There's all sorts of cool stuff. But we tend to forget our infrastructure until it's a problem, right? We're more interested in
Yes.
painting walls and new decorative trim and hanging a picture. But those are the things that really bring a party to a halt. Is the plumbing emergencies, right?
Yeah. I mean, nothing says party's over like a clogged toilet.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Uh,
Wow. Yeah. So, how about if we know? So, we've talked about, I mean, obviously, it'd be great if we could call the plumber before Thanksgiving, before Christmas, and say, hey, can you snake out our drain just in case? But if we didn't do that, what are some other things that we could do if we know we're going to have more people in the house to take care of that or to be more mindful of potential problems?
if you use wipes, we advise that you don't use wipes in your house. Although I even have wipes sitting on the back of my tank at home. So if you use wipes, get rid of them before the party. Buy some
Okay.
single ply toilet paper. I know it sounds like it's a funny thing to do, but those kind of things they break down real easy and they'll get you through the night. So if you know you have a problem system already, yeah, get rid of any those hand napkins, those disposable hand napkins people like to put out for the holidays that have the nice Christmas print on them. Leave those somewhere else, right? Because those always end up making their way in the toilet. Anything that's not toilet paper or meant to be in the toilet shouldn't be down the toilet.
All right. Great ideas. So then let's talk about post problem.
Yeah.
You know, you've got one now. And is there anything that a person can do in their house to get by until a plumber can come?
Sometimes, certainly, there are sometimes there's some cleanouts around most houses. It's at least code here in California to have a cleanout within 24 inches of the front of the house where it exits. And that cleanout is typically the lowest point if you don't have a basement. A lot of you East Coasters and Midwesterners have a sub basement, so that ends up being the lowest point. But commonly, you can open up that cap and at least relieve the system out into the front lawn. It's not necessarily desirable, but you avoid an emergency inside the house at least. And that's something that we can help find. A lot of times we walk people through how to find those cleanouts. They've never seen them before. Sometimes they're in a box. If you have a septic system, there's a lid on it. People have put pavers over the top of them and don't even know where that's at. And we have some tricks for finding that stuff, and we can help people kind of sometimes get past that emergency point.
Right. So I just want to clarify two things. First of all, you're talking about through the Plunjr app, which I have on my phone. And one of the plumbers at Plunjr can help you find that clean out, which would be super helpful. The other thing is that I think in California, a lot of those clean outs are in the front, having lived in California. But in many old houses, they're actually in the back because sometimes the way the houses are arranged on the street, they might go into an alley behind. So that's where all the business end of everything ends up going. So if you
Sure.
don't see something on the front of your house or, just walk all the way around because a lot of times you can follow it either inside down from plumbing or in the basement or something. It just takes a little investigative work once you know what
Yep.
you're looking for.
The basement is the best option. I mean, you can see the direction, right? But certainly, yeah, a sewer line can exit any side of the house, depending on if there's an easement or an alley, like you said. Most commonly goes to the street in most municipalities. If you have a septic system and you know you have septic, it's probably in your backyard or in the back of the house. That's typically where it goes.
And
But yeah,
I was going to say another sneaky location. Pardon me for interrupting
yeah,
you.
no, no.
We actually had to empty ours into my in-laws' garage because that's where they put the clean out.
Nice, nice. That's fun.
Yeah. I've had better times, but you know what? It was worth it. It was absolutely worth it. So sometimes people really don't know they have a septic system. Is there versus a sewer? Can you tell us real quickly what the difference is between septic and city sewer?
Sure, city sewer is pretty straightforward. It's what most people think they have, even if they don't know that they have septic. It's a pipe directly connected to the street that's maintained by your city. Most people own the pipe all the way to the connection in the street. Sometimes some municipalities have sidewalk, whatever your situation is. And septic is a utility you own. It's a basin, buried tank in the back of your house or in the ground with a leach field. Looks like an octopus. It's the tank and a bunch of little pipes that come off, and it leaches the water back into the ground. That sounds really gross to a lot of people, but it's a really natural way to feed back the earth, right?
Yeah, I was
Um,
just going to say, return it to the earth. Be free. Let those fluids and solids be free.
the downside of that is that there's maintenance, right? With a city sewer, we're paying taxes to have the city take care of that sewer, and when it's a septic system, you have to do some of your own self maintenance. And a septic system is a lot like your stomach. It needs good enzymes and bad enzymes. It has bad enzymes. You need good enzymes to kind of
Sure.
eat up whatever's in there. And there's some stuff you can pour down there. There's Ridex, and it's a brand name, but Rotten Tomatoes seem to work the best.
Oh,
If you throw down half a dozen of Rotten Tomatoes once a month, the enzymes from that help break down the stuff that's in a septic system,
wow.
and yeah, help the function of it. So
So how are you getting rotten tomatoes into your septic or through the sink garbage disposal or just
yeah,
open it up and toss them in or
garbage
either?
disposal, right? I
Okay.
mean, once a month, if you bought a six tomatoes and just purposely let them rot and threw them down the garbage disposal along with a lemon because it smells gross, right?
Let me just
um,
say that we never purposefully let our 6 tomatoes rot.
yeah,
All the best intentions happen in the fruit and vegetable drawer in the fridge or in the pantry.
but that works well. Toilet, any way to get it into the septic system is good.
Okay. So I guess I have a tip. I'm not a plumber, but I just want to say never let anyone talk you out of pumping your septic. If you don't know when it was pumped and you think you're having a problem, I think it's always best to call someone to take a look and maybe have it pumped because I got talked out of it once and that was a bad situation. Yeah. I mean, I knew, like, my intuition was like, this needs to be taken care of. And my neighbor was like, oh, no, you don't need to do that. Maybe every 10 years or so. But,
Yeah,
he lived there with his wife. I lived with 4 kids and we had a garbage
yeah,
disposal. We had a water softener at the time. And we were putting a lot of stuff through a septic. And it went from bad to worse. And then it cost a lot more money to fix it. So fortunately, we didn't need to get a new one. But a septic system, if you have to get a new one, is very, very expensive.
yeah, yes, for sure. And what they're sucking out is the solids that settle in there. The leach field is to get the water out, and that takes most of the broken up material out into the back to the earth. Um, And depending on your usage, at least once a year you should be inspecting that. And it's worth the 50 or $100 to have the company come by, take a look, and tell you yay or nay. To suck it out is relatively inexpensive compared to having a complete backup or, like you said, replacing it.
Right, right. And just to give just a cost, I think it was 50 to 100 to have them come look. I think last time I had one pumped, it was between 350 to 400.
Hmm.
The actual problem that I had was closer to $1,400, and a new one could cost what, 15, 20 grand? I mean, or more.
Easy, easy, yeah.
Yeah, or more. And that's somewhat dependent on where you are in the country, but you don't want to spend that money. You want to buy new curtains and fix and paint and do all the fun stuff. You don't want to have
Exactly,
to,
exactly.
yeah, spend money on poop, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I guess we're all getting ready for just a few more winter holidays, maybe getting ready for the new year. Are there any last tips or nuggets of information that you could offer to?
I will to all of our East Coast listeners and cold place listeners
Hmm.
that we're getting into the freeze season, and even Texas last year, right? That had a
Right.
huge freeze problem. There's some really inexpensive ways to protect your water system as well. Lowe's and Home Depot sell these funny little foam caps. They're under $5. You can put them over your hose bib. Anywhere that your pipes are exposed to the elements, you want to protect them so you can avoid any freeze problems. Even to the point where the water line goes into the ground. If you dig a little hole 6 inches deep and put a little insulation down there, pipe insulation, and push the dirt back, that's enough to create a barrier.
Oh, very smart. Very smart. So, another question, actually, that just reminded me of something else because those of us who live in these super cold climates are also possibly getting ready to take warm weather vacations in February and leave our frozen houses behind. Is there anything that we should do before we leave on vacation to prevent potential plumbing problems?
The old school, my grandfather used to say we leave the faucet on at the cabin, right, in Tahoe, but that's no longer socially acceptable. We don't want to waste water,
Oh, right,
but
right. Yeah.
moving water can't freeze is the idea. But draining your system's not it's not harmful as long as you make sure your water heater's off. That's a key. You don't want your water heater to run empty or dry, but the insulation is probably enough to protect you against that.
Maybe what I do is overkill because a lot of times I shut off the water before we go and then just
Mhm.
open up the faucets and let them run out, and then shut
Yep.
them off. And then so there's no water in the actual pipe.
No, that's acceptable. Just to let them run out. There are some cool products out there. I'm not trying to plug these products, but
Oh, go for it.
we've seen an uptick lately in Moen's AutoSense water deal. We install it at a water main, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
connects to your phone. And so for somebody that's traveling, you can see if there's water usage, and you can even turn your water off via the app. So
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
that's kind of cool. And they're relatively inexpensive. They're a DIY for a lot of people. It takes some advanced DIY stuff, but definitely still a DIY. You can do them without a plumber. And so just
No,
another
that's
tip.
great. I'll link that in the show notes because I'm really interested in that product. That would be really good. I do have some water sensors and things that I have around the house, but usually I am present in case something is happening. So
Yeah.
it's nice to know that when you're not around, you could be notified through your phone.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all for today. I am thrilled that you were available to answer all these questions. I think it's great. It's nice to talk to you in this capacity, like I said, instead of when I'm plumbing, doing actual potential plumbing projects. But thank you. It's all of your information is very helpful.
Thanks. And I'm really excited. I had no idea that I was going to meet the community of old house people that I didn't even know that existed. Right. So
Yeah.
meeting you and all the other Instagram people that are working on their old houses, it's really cool to see some of the old architecture and your techniques for how you're doing some of that stuff. I've learned things. I thought I knew everything about carpentry growing up in a carpentry family. And I've learned things about picture rail. You were talking about picture rail.
Yeah.
I'm
All
like,
right.
what's picture rail? I had to go look it up. And you and another guest were having a whole discussion about how high picture rail goes. And I had to go look it up. And I'm like, picture rail's cool, right? So
Well, as much as you've taught me about plumbing, I'm happy to know that I was able to teach you something that you didn't know too.
for sure. It's a whole learning community that you guys are a part of. And I'm glad we found you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. We're glad we found you too.
Thanks for having me. See ya.
If you have a DIY or old house question you would like to submit for listener Q&A, please send it via the contact form at truetalesfromoldhouses.com and we will answer it in an upcoming episode. And now it's my turn to ask you something, and that is, what is your favorite thing about living in an old house? Or what is the most challenging thing about living in an old house? I have been asking that same question all season, and here are a couple of your answers. Robin wrote, I find that one of the most challenging things about owning an old house is that while I may think I know what my next project will be, the house will likely have a different idea, and it's bound to be more expensive. So true, Robin. So true. Tito says that the best thing is getting to know and research other cool old houses and appreciating all the quirks and characters. However, the worst things are the pricey surprises. Indeed, Tito. I would love to hear your answer to these questions all season, so please visit the True Tales from Old Houses website. On the bottom right-hand side, you will see a microphone icon. Click on that microphone and you can leave your answer as a voicemail. Please answer in a complete sentence, or you can submit your answer via the contact form. And you're always welcome to send me a message on Instagram or Facebook. So again, this season's question is, what is your favorite thing about living in an old house? Or what is the most challenging thing about living in an old house? And thank you for your answers, Robin and Tito. I'd like to take a couple of minutes to express some gratitude for our sponsors. True Tales from Old Houses is supported by the Window Course from Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog and the Plunjr app. Need a last-minute gift? The Window Course is a step-by-step do-it-yourself program that will teach you everything you need to know to successfully restore your wood windows. It's self-paced, so you can go as fast or as slow as you need to, and there are several price points to fit your needs and budget. The Window Course is the perfect last-minute gift because it is the gift of education, which you get to keep forever. If you have no plans to start restoring your windows until spring, now's the perfect time to take the course and learn the process. Make a plan, gather supplies, and you'll be ready when the weather turns warm. If you sign up for the Lifetime Access Package or Training Package, then you'll also get a free infrared paint remover, and that's a $130 value. The Window Course is offered with a money-back guarantee, and now it comes with an infrared paint remover, too. And I've still got a coupon code for you. Scott is offering True Tales from Old Houses listeners a special discount. For 10% off, visit thewindowcourse.com and use the coupon code TrueTales. True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by the Plunjr app, whose mission is to solve 100% of plumbing problems that don't require an on-site plumber. The Plunjr app is free to download. Open the app on your phone or tablet, click Talk to a Plumber Now, and you'll be connected with a licensed plumber in your area who will help you troubleshoot and solve your plumbing problem with a face-to-face video chat. Now that you met Aaron in the first segment, you know how smart he is. You know how much he can help. So keep that app handy on your phone. Plunjr offers immediate help, and they can answer any of your plumbing questions. Plunjr can even ship everything you need right to your front door. Plunjr truly is plumbing for the people. So here's what you need to know. Download the free Plunjr app at plunjr.com/download. Tap Talk to a Plumber Now to solve your problem. Put those little plumbing issues back on your to-do list because you can do this. And if you mention the True Tales from Old Houses secret word flapper, your first call is only $10. Use the secret word flapper to save, and be sure to tell them that I sent you. My guest today is Joe Peterson. Joe has lived in his farmhouse in New Brunswick since he was a child. He offers a unique perspective as someone who took the home his parents remodeled over time and brought it back as close to the original as possible.
Hi, I'm Joe Peterson. I live in an 1860s Victorian farmhouse in a small village in North New Brunswick.
Wonderful. Well, Joe, thank you for being here today. I'm so pleased to meet you. And first, I understand that you and your wife, Helen, recently celebrated 34 years of marriage. So I wanted to say
Yes.
Happy anniversary.
Well, thanks very much. Much appreciated.
Let's talk about your house. You call it a heritage home, which I believe is a Canadian term. Is that correct?
Probably a Canadian term as well.
Okay, as I looked it up. So what is the connection to history, and what is a heritage home?
A heritage home in Canada is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a home that's been in the community. It was one of the founding homes in the community. The first homes, and most that Canada and the US are not very different in that farms were the backbone of things. So where I'm sitting now, I'm sitting on 1 acre of land, but it was originally 100 acres of land, which was a prosperous farm at the time. So by heritage, it means it's sort of one of the first homes in an area.
Is it a specific designation that you receive from Canada?
You can, and often I've considered that, but I've never gone through with it. Bob Yap, the very well-known whole house restorer in the U.S., talks about the paint police, where I think some people are afraid to get the designation because after that you have to answer to somebody as to what you're going to do with the house.
Right.
But I've just never gone ahead and got the designation. There has been my property has some notification in the area because there is a lady from my area who took it upon herself to document all the history and heritage, all the homes and buildings and areas. So she painted them in oil, and she published 3 books. So my house is in one of the books.
I find that fascinating. And I love the idea of somebody painting local architecture.
Well, Helen actually purchased one of her original paintings for our anniversary maybe 15 years ago. So we have one of the original paintings on the wall here of the house that later was put into the book.
Oh, that's great. So how many years have you lived in your house?
I've lived here for 54 years.
54 years. Okay, so let's go way back. When you decided to buy your house, how did you know that it was the one?
Well, we moved here when I was 6. It's like, there's my age. Anyone who can do simple math. But we moved here when I was 6. And I come from a very big family, 9 children, 6 boys, 3 girls. I always knew I wanted this house, always. And I think it's got to do with being a book nerd and the Hardy Boys and all this stuff. But I always knew that, I wanted this house. So in 1987, when we got married, I purchased the house from my mom.
So you already lived there before you bought the house. Okay. All right. I'm catching up. So that's where the 54 years get. That's so interesting. So this is your childhood home.
It's my childhood home.
Which you then bought and have lived there ever since.
I probably could have simplified it, but yeah, that's exactly right.
No, that's okay. You made a better story. So I'm glad you did not simplify it. I just wanted to make sure that I understood the timeline, and that's neat. So you've lived in your town your whole life.
Yes.
That's interesting. Is it a big town or a small town?
No, well, it's a small village, a population of maybe 1,300 people outside a town with a population of about 4,000 people, and a little farther away from the city with a population of maybe 8,000 people. 3-hour drive from a major center. Yeah, so it's we're not rural, but we have a nice pace of life here.
I guess this changes some of the questions that I was going to ask you because I didn't realize that you grew up in this house, but it's a good starting point because when it became your project instead of your family's project, what did you and Helen get yourselves into? Was there a lot of work to be done?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Absolutely. It was. And I don't think I'm any different than a whole lot of people who are listening to this right now. You don't realize what you're getting into until you really are into it. It's just, you can go 2 different ways. You take a walk to the bank, hat in hand, and say, okay, here's what I want to do. And they're always happy to help. Or you can take it on a project at a time with funds are available as they're available. And that's always been our way of doing things. Don't worry about the Joneses. Let the Joneses worry about you. And it's worked out. But it's a little bit like being in a small business. It's a lot of people. And a lot of people work in their small business for years and years and years. Then they suddenly take off, and people see them as an overnight success because they never saw everything else was all the work and the toil that took place all those years. Well, this house is a little bit like that because we started from the inside out, and it's only the past 10 years where people are saying, you guys did a great job, and there's a sense of community pride. It's got nothing to do with being those people who want to live in a big fancy place. The house, actually, if you know me, is too fancy for this guy. The fireplace is really ornate. There's plaster cornice, medallions, all these things, but I restored it to what it should have been in the beginning, and that's what we like.
Right. That's funny that you say it's too fancy because there are certain things in my house that I think are way fancier than
I'm
I
sure.
would choose. But here we are. And there is that sense of pride of bringing something back to be kind of the jewel of a neighborhood or just even the jewel of the piece of property it's sitting on. It doesn't have to go so far as the neighborhood or the town, but just knowing that you're doing right by the house feels good. That actually leads to another question then that I wasn't intending to ask you, but now I will. So when you received the house and your family had lived there for years, did you find yourself removing modern, in quotes, I guess, things that were covered up and pulling it back to?
Precisely. You've nailed it right on the head. Exactly. Because we weren't well off. They shouldn't have had 9 kids. They should have stopped, but then you wouldn't get to listen to me ramble this morning if it stopped because I was born later.
Right. Glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks. But the thing is, these well-intentioned renovations that are like they took away from the actual character of the house. I read a quote years ago that said that poverty is the best friend in an old house restorer because that if my parents had been better off, then my grand staircase would have had 5 coats of paint on it instead of the original finish that I took off. So yeah, there were certain things that were taken out of the house that needed to be put back in, and we did that with whenever possible with repurposed building materials.
Right, and we're going to get to that because I have questions about that too. That's really interesting. I guess along kind of a funnier question is that, some of us who are in old houses that had previous owners, we kind of scratch our heads and think, why did they do that? Why did they make that decision? Do you ever do that? I mean, this is your family, so you know why, perhaps.
I
or
do.
do you ever sort of like, why?
Well, see, it was my dad, and I understand why you did it. Everything you did, I wish you hadn't, but I thought I have to do it again. But I understand why he did it. There was beadboard wainscoting in my dining room, but when you were sitting there, you'd feel a draft. Well, the house was just nothing but one big draft, and there was a draft back then. So they think, the drafts are coming through the cracks of these beadboards. So let's pull the beadboard out and put some paneling there. That'll stop the drafts.
Right.
That's one example. They're well-intentioned, and I had a whole lot of fun putting them all back together.
My dad had this thought, and he always told us, most of the time we were renters in my childhood based on his jobs, but he always told me, he said, a house is never an asset. It's always a liability, which of course we flipped that. So many of us flipped that. But he went into every single home with this idea that there was no reason to spend money on it. It was just a liability.
A roof over your head.
Yes.
Well, I understand his point of view. But on the other hand, you've got someone like myself that sees it as a whole lot more. Because I have actually, the lady who lived in my house previous wrote her life story, not in a novel, but she was blind. So the CNIB, that's the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, published a 30-page manuscript that she wrote about her life growing up in this house and this and that. I take that very seriously to respect the people who were here before me. And I hope that the people who are here after me are going to feel the same way.
And I should say that I don't necessarily see houses as a liability.
No, you'd have a podcast for renters if that were the case.
Exactly. So I think so many of us love it. And, I think, there's a draft. I'm going to go put on a sweater.
I get sent down to the furnace. Go put some wood in the furnace.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So when they took things out of the house, did they keep them? Were they the kind of people that just stuffed them in the basement for some other time?
They got repurposed to something else. I know of basic things that were made, sawhorses that were made with oak wainscoting. But so when because I didn't do this by myself, trust me, when we did this, we had to find repurposed materials so that they were proper for the building.
When you entered old home ownership, when you bought this house, did you go into it like many of us expecting that it wouldn't take too long to finish?
Oh, yeah.
Did your initial expectations meet your reality?
No. I thought we would have been done with this a long time ago. And we thought we were going to be finished with this a long time ago. But it's fun. And I know I talk to all my friends. They say, we want to put on vinyl siding. We want to do this so we don't have to maintain our houses. I don't know what I'd do if I wasn't. What are you spending all your time on if you're not maintaining your house? What are you doing?
Right, right.
Well, I'm a runner. You're a runner.
Yes.
The only time I sometimes regret is when I'm doing a Saturday project and I'll see some of my running friends run by the house.
You wish you were with them.
Maybe I should have bought a cookie cutter house, but most of the time I'm quite content.
I love that we have that in common, and I forgot until you just said that, but we're both runners. And you've been running way longer than me, I'm sure.
Yeah, but you've done marathons. I'm a 10K, or I run 5 and 10Ks 3 or 4 times a week.
I'll tell you what, I found when I started running that I really preferred to go the longer distances. I thought, gosh, this, all out 5K is really hard. I'd rather just kind of ease into my pace and stay there for a while.
Half a kilometer down the road from me is the beginning of our running trails. That's the closest thing I have to the church. Our running trails are beautiful. They're maintained all winter long. So I just step out of the front door and I'm gone. And I'm back in 45 minutes to 50 minutes. And I hope to be doing it for years and years and years.
Runners, we jokingly call that the Church of the Sunday Long Run.
That's the Church of the Sunday Long Run, yes.
All right, well, let's talk about your projects. And I love asking this to people who've done this work for a really long time. But how do you plan your projects? Are you detailed? Are you fly by the seat of your pants? I mean, how do you work it?
Detailed with a full knowledge that at some point you're going to have to fly by the seat of your pants. Because you don't know what you're going to want to cover. And there's an evolution to an old house. And your restoration and renovation projects have to follow that. Here is the evolution of an old house built in 1860. Well, the washroom, bathroom is essentially a chamber pot. And the other part of it is up the backyard. It's a building in the backyard, right?
Right.
Sometime around the 20s, plumbing came into norm. So they just picked a bedroom and they turned it into a bathroom. People come here all the time and say, I can't get over how big your bathroom is. That's because someone gave up a bedroom,
Right.
So they put the bathroom in, but the plumbing, they don't want to rip walls open and things. So, and I'm sure anybody out there with their old home, that everyone's seen it, they run the plumbing down in the corner and they box it in and wallpaper it or paint it. So then when I come along, or you come along, or one of the other listeners come along, they want to fix all this. Well, then you're looking at a renovation, not just on the bathroom, but on the dining room that's below.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like dominoes. You got to do the bathroom upstairs first, and then you're opening up the walls and putting those pipes inside the wall where they belong. And you got these big holes in the dining room, so then you have to do the dining room as well. And the same goes for heating. These big places didn't have central. You and I want central heat, and so the central heating came along maybe in the 50s. The big giant octopus furnaces in the basement.
Those are so cool. I had a picture of those on a show notes once. I'll have to post that again.
And they're made of a thick, heavy gauge metal that holds the heat like thermal mass. But then they'd have to run heating ducts upstairs into the bedrooms. So then they'd run those heating ducts on the outside of the wall in a corner, painted. So then when you renovate, you've got to open the walls and put those things in the walls where they belong. And right now, I'm proud to say all my heating ducts are in the walls where they belong.
Yeah, that's great. That's an accomplishment.
Oh, yeah, that's what I like. People come in here and go, wow, your place looks great. Yeah, and my heating ducts are in the walls. My plumbing is in the walls. It's where it belongs, not on the outside.
And nobody cares about that part, right? I had a chimney rebuilt a couple years ago, and every time somebody comes over, I'm like, do you want to see my chimney? And nobody wants to see the chimney. Nobody cares.
And that's maybe where you spent the most money.
Truthfully, it is one of our biggest expenses was having that chimney rebuilt, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. So when you plan, are you a list maker? Do you gather supplies and everything and then start? Or do you just kind of open it up and then go from there?
I'm not. Helen is. Helen is the planner. I'm the mouthpiece. Helen's the brains. That's always how it's been. And she makes the lists. She does all these things. And I'm the book nerd and the dreamer. And I run at it and I get over my head.
We all do.
I either got to call on a professional or a family member or friends. And this has been 34 years.
Right. How do you decide when to call in someone and when you want to tackle something as a complete DIY project? You said you've had a lot of help over the years.
Spidey sense, I think, because I have an older brother that I don't know how he knows when I'm in a panic mode. He just shows up and he was like, "All right, Joe, let's look at this again." You know, yeah. When I get over my head, I'll pick up the phone and I'll call. I'm not like one of these guys who won't ask for directions because time is money, and you want to get this room back to functioning at some point. The last big job we did was our kitchen, and that was the biggest job we've done to date, and it was the most rewarding.
Yourself?
The only thing I didn't do was build the cabinets. We had someone else build the cabinets, and the whole kitchen. I mean, Helen's the cook. That's her room. I had a couple things I wanted. Here's what I wanted. We had salvaged 2 newel posts from a church that was being torn down. I wanted those 2 newel posts to hold up the island, and then I wanted a functioning vintage telephone.
That's great. Yes.
I go to these old homes, and they have a crank phone, whatever. And everybody says, "Does it work?" I wanted a big light on the wall phone that was functioning. That's all I asked, and everything else was Helen's planning. How big the island was. We built up a mock-up with 2x4s. When the whole room was gutted and down to nothing, she gave me the dimensions of the island. Like, are we taking up too much real estate? Are we going to be able to move in here? And I made a mock-up of the island, and we put it in the middle of the floor and made sure that everything was like that was good. This is fun in my house.
Well, of course, I have to know. Did you get your telephone?
I got my telephone, absolutely.
Excellent. Do you still do you take calls on it or make calls on it?
I take calls on it mostly when my young nieces and nephews come over at Christmas time. They want to pick it up because they can't quite figure out. One guy asked me, "What's the password?" My father-in-law is 88. He's great. He stops by for a visit. I always reach over and unplug that phone because it goes off like a fire alarm, right? So I don't want him expiring at my table because this thing went off next to his ear.
Right. That makes sense. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about, go back again, I guess, when your girls were little. You said you started and stopped this kind of work. At this point, with my kids almost grown, I mean, I can see how clearly that my time with them is limited. And I honestly, with no regrets, often blow off projects to spend time with them instead. But I do remember when they were little, and I just couldn't imagine them being grown and gone. And seeing the unfinished projects, it kind of drove me crazy. And I dreamt of large blocks of time to get things done. And I just wondered, when you had to pause the work, did you find that frustrating, or did you take it all in stride?
I found it frustrating because you're sort of torn because you don't want to miss your kid's childhood. And remember, of being 9 kids, I watched my older brothers and sisters get married first and have children first, and they're gone first. So I knew how quickly they're not going to be here anymore. And I knew how quickly there's only a short window where they think you're great. I got all those notes.
We save those, don't we?
Oh, yeah. Promise to make my bed. There's no expiry date on that. I keep those.
Oh, yeah, the little coupons, the coupon books.
Those are coupons. I keep them. If we're not getting along, well, listen, you said I was the world's greatest dad. Is that under handwriting? So I keep that stuff. But mostly, and you touched on this in a previous episode, you were talking about what it was like for them to grow up in basically a low budget, this old house episode. What was it like for them? And I always felt like with my kids and with Helen, like I dragged you into this,
Right.
What do you think? Wouldn't you be happier with a golfer? But I got a message. Both our daughters are grown now. Megan's 30, Chelsea's 28, and Megan is living in Halifax, Nova Scotia. You've been through Halifax.
I have, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Talk about old homes, right?
Sure. Half of it, half the city, right? Isn't that an interesting story? Yeah.
So she lives in a very, very modern apartment with her boyfriend. And she sent a Facebook message one Saturday morning that was a picture of a can of urethane, and he had decided he was going to recoat their apartment floors. He was going to give them a fresh coat. She sent me the picture with a caption, "Smells like my childhood in here." So that's all right.
Yeah, I would say so.
watching mom and dad do projects together, watching your do these things, seeing the pride in a job well done, and doing it yourself. I think those are good methods, good lessons to learn.
I agree with you. Absolutely. Did you ever worry about them with, old house hazards, lead paint, asbestos, all that stuff?
Very, very much so. Very much so. And the most difficult project I ever did was my downstairs hallway. Now, the hallway is the center of everything. You can't avoid the hallway. That's how you get to every place. See, the other thing about this big farmhouse of mine is that one whole west side of it originally was designed to have another family because there were farmhands. There was another family lived here that worked on the farm. So when I renovated, that became, they have an entire half of the house. They have a large family room and their bedrooms off of that. But they still have to come downstairs to get to the kitchen. So on the weekends, I've been working in the hallway and I had a sheet of plastic up on the top of the stairs and a sheet of plastic downstairs. I can still see them lifting up the plastic and going in and get a snack, go back up. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
That bothered me.
But I'm sure they're fine. I mean, at this point, you can see back and you were concerned about that. But now that they're adults, and I'm sure just like everybody, young kids especially are tested by their pediatrician for lead levels and things like that.
Yeah. As far as lead is concerned, I wasn't too worried about that because the rooms that I was, by the time they moved into those rooms, it had been gutted. I took all the trim off, numbered it, took it outside to my shop, stripped it down, put it back up. So dad took the hit, not them.
Well, you've used, and let's finally talk about this because this is super interesting to me, that you've used a lot of reclaimed and salvaged materials. And I just would love to hear more about that.
Well, it's a sad fact that there are a lot of old buildings that are being torn down. And a lot of them are churches. There are a lot of churches. It has to be the same in your area, U.S.
Right, it is.
They had large parishes, a lot of people in them. And the buildings become old. And there's a huge sentimental value to them. But then there's a practical side that says, we just can't keep maintaining this thing and heating it, blah, blah, blah. So the decision is made to destroy them and build something smaller or use another building that's in better condition, things like that. So on two occasions. One was a Catholic, and I wonder if I'll use the proper term here, the Catholic presbytery. You know what that is?
I'm not familiar, no.
The presbytery is the building usually very nearby a big Catholic church where the priest would live. They were huge buildings, very ornate and very, very big. So locally, a Catholic presbytery was being torn down. So they invited people in to buy whatever they wanted to buy. So it was like people would go in and you could buy the dishwasher, you could buy the cupboards, you could buy the chairs, you could buy this all for pennies on the dollar. So when I asked, can I have the floors? And I'm like, what? You want floors? You're not serious. They're nailed down. Yeah. So for the donation of $100, I could have all the floors that I want.
Wow. How many square feet? Oh, I'm sorry. That your metric. I'll never get it right.
No, square feet is what we go by here.
Okay. All right.
How many square feet?
Just approximately.
Can I cheat with a calculator?
Of course.
My kitchen is 250 square feet. So I got enough for that. There's also my hallway. And I've probably got about 500 square feet of prime old growth maple. You take a skill saw with a carbide blade and you go start at one end of the room. You just rip up a board and you break it. That's sacrificial. Then you're looking at tongues and they just pop up. And a 12-foot board, they might use 4 nails. They don't use a lot of nails. They're square nails. And it pops up so easy with almost no damage. And then you just take all those boards. And then with the square nails, you want to take the nails out of it. They fall out almost. And then you take all that away. And then you squirrel it away until you're ready to do your project. You become an unintentional hoarder because buildings are very seldom being torn down just when you're doing a renovation project.
Right. That's so true. I've interviewed Daniel Cantor before. You may have heard that episode, but he has a pretty active blog and he's on social media and he always talks about how much hoarding he does. He does so much with salvaged everything, hardware, salvaged wood. I mean, he'll go to some construction site and pull out the old growth stuff that someone's tearing out for some modern junk, and he'll save it and send it through his Plunjr and strip it and use it some other time. And it's so smart. I mean, what a cost-saving measure, and you get higher quality materials.
Better quality material. It's appropriate to the house. So I got the hardwood floors of the Catholic Presbytery. But my dining room, actually, the lady who wrote her life story about my house, her mother was born maybe 15 miles away in an old farmhouse, and she got married and spent her life here until she passed away. So she was born in that farmhouse. They demolished it. I got the floors out of it and put those floors in this house. So the floors in the house where she was born came here, and then she eventually died.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Huh. Were there other things that you salvaged for the house besides flooring?
Downstairs, first impressions are everything. So that's why all our old houses have these really cool spiral staircases and all the nice cherry wainscoting, because you walk to the front door and wow. But upstairs, where people didn't go very often, the floors were softwoods. And my floors were destroyed or removed upstairs somewhat. So when they tore down a United Church, and United Churches versus Catholic churches, United Churches tend to be somewhat less ornate. So we got all for a donation of $50. We got all the pine we needed to do the entire upstairs, the entire 20-foot boards that you can't purchase anymore, and tongue and groove, and I put them all down. And after you put them all down, after you install them, then you have to resurface them. You take the sander out and you sand them and you make them look new again.
Well, believe it or not, our time is almost over. I could talk to you for 2 days about all of this, but I did have one last question for you. And it was on your intake form. You mentioned that you wish you were 20 years younger so that you could start all over again. And I would love to know, what would you do differently?
What would I do differently? Nothing.
Nothing.
I wish that recently someone I know approached me and showed me these pictures of an old home. And I said, great, nice. What are you getting at? Well, what's this? Why are you showing me these? Because she said, I'm considering buying it. And this is a person of considerable, he was deep pockets, So he wasn't looking at me spending my weekends helping him out. He wanted me to consult with him. And it never happened because the house sold before it took place. But I would do this all over again. It's a very rewarding sort of life to live. You are a steward of it because you're doing good work for the next people who will live. You hope that the next people who come here are going to appreciate it as much as you do. And I have all sorts of people that come to visit. They're decorators, quote unquote decorators, who kind of go too far, and they would turn a restored 160-year-old farmhouse into a McMansion in no time at all, with Italian different ceramic tiles and all these things, you know what I mean? But there's only so far you can go, and then you cross a line when it's not a restored, beautiful home. Windows. Right?
Yes. Do you have original windows?
Most of my windows are original.
Excellent. I always like to hear that, of course. Yes. Slightly obsessed over here in
Yes.
Western New York with old windows, for sure.
Yes.
Well, I am so glad that we finally got to have this conversation, and thank you for sharing your experience and your story. And I hope you'll send me some photos, because I would love to put those on the show notes.
Absolutely.
All right. And I am sure that listener curiosity is piqued. I don't think you have a blog or social media. Is that correct?
I don't, no.
No. Okay, that's fine. It's not a requirement. I just wanted to make sure we weren't missing an opportunity to see your project continue. But pictures will be great. I would love to put them on the show notes.
You will, absolutely, yes.
All right. Well, thank you again, Joe. It's really been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you as well.
Thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses. And thank you to my guests, Aaron from Plunjr and Joe Peterson. To continue the conversation, be sure to follow True Tales from Old Houses and Blake Hill House on Facebook and Instagram. And if you enjoy this show, please rate or review it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorites. I always hate to admit how important the ratings and reviews currency is to podcasts, but it's true. Ratings and reviews help listeners find us by bumping us up on the podcast listening charts. Leaving a rating or review is a super easy, non-monetary way you can support the show, so thank you. For more information about this episode, including photos, everything we talked about today, and to request a transcript, visit truetalesfromoldhouses.com. Until next time.